Are you frustrated by the idea that Tailwind CSS is only useful if you're using frameworks like React or Svelte? Well, I've got great news. It's not. In this video, I'll show you exactly how to set up Tailwind CSS in its simplest form, with no frameworks involved. Let's dive right in. We'll explore two methods today, one using the Tailwind CSS CDN for quick setups, and another using NPM for a more customizable workflow. First, let's start with the CDN method. The CDN method is the easiest way to get started, especially if you're just testing things out or creating a prototype. Here's how it works. A CDN, or Content Delivery Network, lets you include Tailwind CSS directly in your project without needing to install or configure anything. It's fast, simple, and doesn't require any build tools. Now that we understand what the CDN is, let's move on to setting it up in our project. First, we'll create a folder for our project. You can name it whatever you like. Let's call it My Tailwind Project for this example. Inside this folder, we'll create a basic index.html file. This file will hold the structure of our web page. Now, let's bring in the magic. To use Tailwind CSS with the CDN, we need to add a script tag in the head section of our HTML file. This is the link that loads Tailwind CSS into your project. All we have to do now is start using its utility classes in the body of our HTML to style our page. And by the way, I'll include this link to the CDN and the full documentation in the description below, so you can easily grab it for your own projects. Now that we have Tailwind CSS set up, let's test if it's working correctly. To do that, I'll add a simple heading inside the body of my index.html file and apply some Tailwind CSS classes to style it. I'll create an H1 with a class attribute of text 3XL, font bold, and text blue 500. This will make the text larger, bold, and blue. Once that's done, I'll save the file and open it in a browser. If everything is set up correctly, I should see the text displayed in a larger, bold blue font. If you don't see any styling, make sure the CDN link is correctly placed in the head section and that you've saved your file before refreshing the browser. And just like that, we have Tailwind CSS working without any frameworks or complicated setup. Now, let's take it a step further by adding a simple button. I'll create a button element with a class attribute that includes BG green 500 for a green background, text white to make the text white, px4 and pi2 for padding, rounded LG for smooth rounded edges, and mt4 to add some space above it. When I refresh the browser, I should see a nice green button with smooth rounded edges. And that's it. With just a few lines of code, we've set up Tailwind CSS and used its utility classes to style a heading and a button, all without any frameworks or extra configuration. Now that we've seen how easy it is to use Tailwind with the CDN, let's explore another method, which is installing Tailwind using NPM. This method is useful if you're working on a more advanced project where you need customization, optimizations, or additional configurations. NPM, which stands for Node Package Manager, is the default package manager for Node.js. It helps developers install, manage, and share JavaScript packages easily, making project development faster and more efficient. First, I'll make sure I have Node.js installed on my system. To check, I'll open my terminal and type node --v. If Node.js is installed, this will return a version number. If not, I'll need to download and install it from nodejs.org. I'll also include the link in the description. Once Node.js is installed, I'll navigate to my project folder and initialize a new project by running npm init with the -y flag. This will quickly generate a package.json file, which is needed to manage project dependencies. Next, I'll install Tailwind CSS by running npm install with the -d flag followed by Tailwind CSS. This will download and set up everything needed for Tailwind CSS to work in the project. After that, I'll generate a Tailwind CSS configuration file by running npx Tailwind CSS init. This creates a tailwind.config.js file where we can customize our Tailwind setup if needed. According to the TailwindCSS website, after installing TailwindCSS, there are additional steps needed to make it work properly in a project. Let's go through them in a second. Step 2. I need to configure my template paths inside the Tailwind configuration file. This ensures that Tailwind scans the correct files and removes any unused styles, keeping my final CSS file as small as possible. To do this, I'll open the tailwind.config.js file that was generated earlier and locate the content section. Here, I need to specify the paths to my HTML and JavaScript files. Instead of writing the paths manually, I'll paste the value from the Tailwind CSS website. This ensures that all my template files are correctly scanned for Tailwind classes. I will also include index.html at the root level to ensure Tailwind processes it as well. Step 3. I need to include Tailwind's built-in styles inside my CSS file. To do this, I'll open my main CSS file. Let's call it input.css and add 3 special Tailwind directives. First, at Tailwind base, which includes all the foundational styles. Then, at Tailwind components, which loads Tailwind's pre-built component styles. And finally, at Tailwind utilities, which enables all the utility classes. Once these steps are done, Tailwind CSS is now properly configured and ready to use. Step 4. Now that Tailwind CSS is configured, I need to start the build process. This step is important because Tailwind scans my template files for utility classes and generates the final CSS file that will be used in my project. To do this, I'll paste the command from the Tailwind website. This command scans my HTML files for Tailwind classes, processes my input CSS file, and generates an output CSS file that contains only the styles I'm using. I'll also make sure to include the watch flag so that Tailwind automatically updates the output CSS file whenever I make changes to my project. Then hit the Enter key. It should now show you this warning, but don't worry about it. Step 5. Once the build process is running, the final step is to link the generated CSS file to my index.html. This will allow me to use Tailwind classes inside my HTML elements. To do this, I'll open index.html and add a link tag in the document head. The href attribute will point to ./src/output.css, which is the file generated by Tailwind. Now, to confirm everything is working, I'll add an h1 element and apply some Tailwind classes. For example, I'll set the text size to 3XL, make it bold, and underline it. If I refresh my browser and see the text styled accordingly, then Tailwind CSS is successfully installed and working. But what if the styles don't appear as expected? If I refresh the browser and nothing changes, the first thing I'll check is whether the Tailwind build process is still running in the terminal. If the process has stopped or wasn't started, I'll go back to the terminal and restart it by pasting the command from the Tailwind CSS website again. This will ensure that Tailwind scans my files and regenerates the output CSS. After that, I'll refresh the browser once more. If everything is set up correctly, the Tailwind styles should now be applied. And that's it. Now I have Tailwind CSS set up and running in its base form, without needing any frameworks. Whether I use the CDN or the npm installation method, I can now start styling my project with Tailwind's utility classes. If you found this helpful and would like to say thank you, please like and subscribe since this is a new channel. It really helps a lot. Also, if you have any questions or topics you'd like me to cover, drop them in the comments. Thanks for watching.